you for joining us for another Startup Virtual Coffee. It's a heavy week, guys. So luckily, every time I book speakers, I seem to book the perfect ones that kind of fit into what we're talking about and match. I had the joy of interviewing Dee Dee from Pop Cycle a couple weeks ago, who then kind of introduced me to Tana, who is the perfect person to have a discussion with today about all things business, business in Tucson during the COVID time, and as well as what's going on in the world. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. Tana was the owner of Bohemia here in Tucson. She was also one of the first people helping to pioneer in the first 10 West Festival here. She talks about in her bio a little bit about getting sued by Bob Dylan. I'm going to leave her bio open because I want her to tell us more about herself, her background, and what she's doing. So help me welcome Tana Kelch.
Hey.
Let me get you all settled there.
I'm grateful to be here today. Thank you so much for having me.
Well,
and hello, Tucson. I am. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Tell me about yourself. Tell me all the things.
Well, I grew up in Tucson, so honorary native. I wasn't born there, but I've been in Arizona since I was a year and a half, and just always loved the desert. It's a wild place, and it makes you pretty resilient and squirrely. So I was grateful to end up there and went to college at NAU, so I could stay in state but be away from my family just enough. Get a taste of the mountains. I got a degree in public relations because I couldn't figure out if I wanted to be an actress or a politician or a journalist. So I just went for public relations because it seemed to make sense at the time. Ended up coming back to Tucson after I graduated and couldn't figure out what I was going to do with a public relations degree during a time that switched over to a lot of PowerPoint stuff. And I didn't have the computer chops. So I took a job in retail at Buffalo Exchange, and it totally changed my life. It really took me down this path of realizing my purpose, even though I didn't maybe realize it at the time, but it introduced me to so many artists and free thinkers and a crazy retail environment that would eventually lead me to open Bohemia. It was a really, really wonderful time to work there. And I met, some great friends and inspirations during that time. In between working at Buffalo Exchange and starting Bohemia, I worked for the Brewster Center, which is now Emerge. So I was able to do some pretty heavy nonprofit work. We dealt with victims of domestic violence, and I was able to help them get back on their feet through a transitional housing program that I actually created, which was intense because that was not really where my foundation was, but I took the challenge on because I really wanted to help people. And then I moved on to the Humane Society, where I worked in the education department and learned that I am not an educator and I don't relate to kids well. So I think it was probably better for me to just focus on adults. Not a mom. Yeah, I was a kid that grew up fast, so I think I'm an only child, and I was around adults so much that I just didn't have those chops. But it was fun. I met some great friends there too. But working in those nonprofit realms, if you've ever worked in a nonprofit, you know that you do the job of like 5 people instead of 1. And so I think it really gave me a great foundation to deal with a lot of hours of work, a lot of stressful situations, the ability to think on my feet and really be resourceful, because you're working with small budgets and you really have to just kind of, bootstrap it more than ever. I didn't ever have to write a grant, which someday I need to learn that skill. I also worked in the service industry. I was a bartender because nonprofits don't pay well. And so I also smattered in another job because I'm crazy and like to work a lot. And so being in the service industry also gives you that ability to work really hard, to deal with a variety of personalities in a calm manner. So it helps with my diplomacy, I think. And just really, I think everybody should work in a service industry job, because I think it just gives you a perspective and a slice of the world that is very handy in dealing with people in general. You know, and you learn how to kill people with kindness, for sure. So yeah, so then I had met artists through my variety of jobs, and I was seeing them work so hard to set up for art shows and farmers markets and try to sell their stuff, because there weren't this, you know, pre 2008, I suppose, there weren't a whole lot of places in Tucson that sold artwork. There were galleries, and there were
Oh, you're freezing on me, Tana.
large scale that people could. Oh,
there we go. We're back.
What's that?
You were freezing on
me. No. Okay. Woo.
No worries.
No.
I'm so glad that you touched on.
No, I've turned off everything.
Are you okay? I think we're back now.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So I'm glad that you touched on nonprofits, because this is my first time in the nonprofit sector, actually working for a nonprofit. And it's 4 of us, but we do the job of like 15 people. We're our own little tiny army. So I'm glad that you said that, because even for me coming in, I'm learning, but we are very much a tiny army.
It is. It's true.
It is. I want to know about how you almost got sued by Bob Dylan.
Okay.
We're going to go there first, and then we're going to jump into Artist in Bohemia.
All right, perfect. So in, I believe it was 2010, a friend of mine was starting a media company, and he asked if he could create a spot, a fake commercial for Bohemia. And he just wanted to do it for a portfolio purpose. And he ran some ideas by me, and we settled on what he called Sub-Bohemian Homesick Blues. And he came in and he shot the shop, and then he put me on a green screen. I had cue cards with, you know, parts of the song that he wrote that was a parody of Subterranean Homesick Blues by Bob Dylan. So he, you know, he parodied the song, we parodied the video, and he put it on YouTube. But he had kind of made it into a commercial. And parodies are fine when they're not for commercial use. So copyright infringement is a real thing. Somebody who ran the hotel spots around like the City View TV saw the YouTube and contacted me and said, I'd really like to run these in the hotels. And I was like, well, that sounds great. Not really thinking about that copyright infringement situation. So it ran for a while. Economy was bad. I didn't renew my contract, but he, out of the goodness of his heart, kept running it for me, unbeknownst to me. Bob Dylan came and did a show at Ava and stayed in a hotel with his lawyers where the commercial was running. And in August of 2011, I got a certified letter from one of his lawyers for, I think, like four counts of, it was a cease and desist, and it was for 4 counts of copyright infringement at like $150,000 a piece.
Oh, no.
And I'm already like, I'm getting close to having to close the shop. I'm facing bankruptcy. I'm just like, what? Like, this is Bob Dylan. My shop is called Bohemia. What? So we had to the hotel guy had to swipe all of the commercials off, which he had just updated, like 34 properties. He was facing counts for all 34 properties too. I mean, they went after us hard, and it was scary. It was really scary to get that letter. I mean, looking back, it's amazing, but at the time I was just like, oh my gosh, how? What am I gonna do? And so we, luckily, the guy that made the video, his dad's a lawyer. And so he helped us out with advice on how to handle the situation. And we took it down from all the platforms. I called the lawyer, had a conversation with him. And I was so emotional about it, I started crying. And you could tell that he had a daughter, because my crying freaked him out so much. And he was just like, I need you to calm down. I need you to calm down. And I just, I told him, I was like, the well is dry. Like, I don't know how I can help you. He wanted us to at least reimburse for his lawyer fees.
Uh-huh.
And I sent an email to him later saying that, if we're still open the next time you're in town, I think that you and Bob would really love this shop. And I'm sorry that I'm not going to be able to reimburse your lawyer fees of $5,000 for your letter. So anyway, great story though.
Okay, so you started in working in retail, and then fast forward, you've met some artists at markets and things like that. And then fast forward, you've opened Bohemia. How did that kind of all tie in together? You started with 200 local artists. I didn't even know there were 200. Yes, I kind of do now, but when I'm moving into Tucson, didn't know there was 200 local artists.
Right. It was pretty amazing. So we actually only started with 20 artists. And it just grew. And like at the end of the first year, we had 100 artists that we were representing in a 750 square foot space. So we expanded the second year. And then at the end of that year, we reached 200. There was a lot going on in that shop, but backtrack so I had a lot of artist friends that were doing markets and shows, and not all customers can make it to those shows and markets, and artists who have to produce their work to make money, they don't always have the time to afford to sell it. They don't have that. They should be producing and making their product, and not all artists are comfortable or great at selling their things too. I mean, that's not a diss at all. It's just people have their wheelhouses. And so we were doing parties at my house. So I would get artists together at my house, and we'd make appetizers and have wine and invite our friends over. And they were doing so well. And, I was getting hostess gifts, and artists were selling their stuff, and it was really great. And so I was like, why can't we just do this every day? So I found a place with cheap rent in the Lost Barrio, and we just did it. And I say we because it's a collective we. Like I didn't do it, I made a space happen, and the artists brought their magic. And it really took off. People really responded well to it. You were finding unique things that had meaning, because I could tell the story of the people that created them, or they could come and meet them at events. It was just a really, really special place. And I think it helped people who maybe didn't appreciate the process of creating. It gave them a platform to do that as well, and to learn like how important, conscious spending is, and how that can affect a community. So, and I also opened the day the war started, the Iraq war. So, we like.
Who does that?
I didn't see it coming. Nobody really did. So, there was some turmoil along the way, but we made it work, and it became a big movement. It was a magical place.
You started with 20 artists, you moved to 100, and then you had 200. How did you kind of organize all the artists and makers? And I love the fact that you said, I didn't do it. It's a collective. So as your collective artists, that's why it happened. You guys together made it happen. So it's just one big group of people to put out for a good cause. So how did you organize all of the artists?
Not well. I mean, it was a lot of work at first. I was doing everything by hand because I opened so fast. It opened so fast. Like I think we were up and running in like a month and a half from me signing the lease,
Oh,
and I just kind of went for it. And I was like, there's that phrase, I think Kelly Fryer used to use it, building the plane as you're flying it. And that is absolutely what was happening. Everything was done with files and by hand at first. And then I worked up into an Excel program where I was, logging in all of the artist inventory because we didn't have Square. There wasn't an affordable way to track things at that point. I think most inventory systems were around $50,000 at that point. And I didn't have time. I didn't want to learn, and to a detriment, I didn't make time to try to come up with better ways, but we just kept a lot of paper trails and worked through Excel, and we would mark the daily sales and enter them in, make sure that all the artists paid out. And it wasn't a perfect system, but I really tried to do my best to make sure that those artists were taken care of and paid, and everybody was happy. But not a perfect system.
But you made it work, and your artists were happy, and that's amazing because I don't know that I could run all those artists with paper and pencil, and then slowly into Excel. But that's great. It's a make it work moment.
Yeah, nonprofits, that helped. That experience helped.
Make it work, yes. When starting out amplifying so many local artists, what was your philosophy that drove you to help people buying and support locally?
I felt like the artists, they spend their money wisely and consciously too. Most artists will go to that local coffee shop instead of Starbucks. And I really thought it was just such a nice way to, regurgitate that money into the Tucson economy. They needed the lift. People need good stuff to give and put in their houses. And it made sense to me. And during that time, Local First Arizona was really hitting the streets. Kimber Lanning created that organization because she actually had a music venue at the time, and all of these bands were coming through, and some of them were like, we don't even know what town we're in anymore because it's so homogenized. And she saw that power of small local business where it can keep the flavor of your community and make it interesting and build tourism and really have those special aspects of your town. So propping up the local economy just made sense because I don't understand why you wouldn't want to put it back in. Like that's your house. You need to keep it. You need to keep the foundation going. So it just made sense. Yeah. And I love artists. Like they're so good.
They are. Well, we're going to jump back.
Boring.
Talking about artists, you have organized music festivals kind of all over. How did you get into music festivals? You did Outside Lands, which is in the Bay Area.
Yes.
How did you kind of get into that? And then we're going to come back.
So after the shooting at Safeway, where Gabby Giffords was shot, and many others, but that shooting, there was a big benefit concert that happened at the TCC, and somehow my name got thrown in the hat to help a woman that Jackson Browne was bringing in to do all the backstage hospitality areas. They had to create, I think we had to create like 20 dressing rooms because it was a big concert. I mean, Alice Cooper played, Jackson Browne, Calexico, Kev Mo. It was incredible. It was a really beautiful event spearheaded by Ron Barber, and it was to fund it was the Fund for Civility, Respect, and Understanding. And so I was brought on to help find stuff for this woman, because she's like, I usually have a box truck of things and I'm coming with a suitcase of fabric. So I called in favors all around town to get lighting and artwork, and just trying to create a space out of nothing to help these people. And we did it in like 2 days. So just to keep the artists comfortable, and it was really incredible. And just, it felt good to do something too, because it was a dark time as well. And it just felt really good to do something. So Judy was so impressed with the work that my friend Michelle Spaniard helped too. And Judy was like, do you want to come and work a music festival in August in San Francisco? Because you're pretty good at this stuff. So I could really use your help. And I was, yeah, absolutely. Like, it's a slow time. Some are slow at the shop. I'll come, I'll work. And I got to do it for a few years. Our crew was in charge of setting up all of that. The production company was just so conscious about keeping artists respected and comfortable. And so we got to create these like dazzling trailers. And then I worked hospitality during the festival to make sure that, all of the VIPs had what they needed and the artists had what they needed. Like it was a dream. I still pinch myself because I got to see some of my favorites from the side of the stage. And, I had to find like weird things to hold crystal for artists. And like, I mean, it was wild. I also had to like spin beers and ice when they got cold. Alabama Shakes played my stage, and they were on in the middle of the afternoon because it was like they were booked right before they hit big. And so our VIP area was packed. Like Bob Weir was back there, Brett Dennen, David Cross. I mean, it was wild. And we had warm beer. So I was like spinning beers to make sure that, Bob Weir had a cold beer. So yeah, those were fun times. It was hard work. And I hurt myself a lot because I'm very clumsy, but yeah, it was great. So
I would like to hear all your stories, and your background is amazing. You've done so many things, and you are really a pillar here in the community. I've heard about you from a ton of people. So I'm so glad that you're here. I want to know more about, after you opened Bohemia, you opened during war, and then 2008 hit. The recession hit. What happens? How do you kind of take it on?
So I had made a decision. Things were going well in the Lost Barrio, but it was hard to get traffic down there. And so I made a decision to move to a new location, and I signed a lease in June of 2007. And it was for a space about 3 times the size that I had been in, and also more expensive. I was going to have to double my sales, but it was a really exposed shopping strip with good anchors and really great shops. So it was a destination of sorts, but it was at Broadway and Country Club. So more people were driving by. And the build out took about 6 months. So we went through the holidays in the Lost Barrio that year. And then in January, we closed up and did a quick 2-week move to get set up to reopen. And then the day after we reopened was kind of the first dip in the stock market. And here I was with triple the expenses and lots of overhead and lots of responsibility. And we were selling luxury items to a point. And so when that financial downturn happened, people had to cut out a lot of those things. So we went into that not doubling our sales like we needed to. And it just kind of spiraled from there. And I tried hard to renegotiate my lease, take out loans. And I did as much as I could, and probably more. I just went into a lot of debt, and I didn't ask for help enough from the community because I knew it was already heavy, and I just didn't want to put it out there. I felt like I needed to just figure out a way to do it. I took on another job because I needed to keep my employees. I felt I was so conflicted, and it was so hard to take that away from the artist and the community. And it spiraled, and unfortunately had to end, and it ended in a very abrupt way. But I was nervous that, my rent was paid, but I was nervous that if I tried to end my lease, that they would maybe lock the doors and take all the stuff, and everything was on consignment, and I couldn't let that happen. So we moved out in a night, and yeah, it was pretty traumatic and wild. And I wish it could have been different. I wish we could have ended it on a better note, but it is what it is. And, a lot of lessons were learned during that time.
2008 was rough. 2008 was a rough year.
Oh.
It's a recession. Oh, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
So, let's talk about the similarities between 2008 and then we're in this COVID pandemic in 2020. And I feel like we're kind of mirroring it, but I think it's a little hard.
It is.
For retail. So how do you see the similarities, and how can our community back to what it was before COVID?
There's a lot of similarities. I mean, my situation took a few years to build up to the point that people were just thrusted into in a day, basically. Yes. I mean, I definitely, there were some old wounds that came up, knowing how frightening and stressful a situation like this is for small business. And, you just, you already have the stress of running your business, and now you have to have the added stress of pivoting and trying to figure out how to make things work before a summer too. I mean, it's such a, pandemics are, I'm sure, never timed correctly, but it's just such a hard time, because the spring is when businesses really need to get their foundation going for summer. We didn't have any kind of bailout, so I feel like that has been wonderful. It's not enough, but for businesses to be able to access that, obviously not a perfect rollout or system, but at least we had a more progressive Congress that were able to put those things in place, because small business wasn't getting anything back in 2008. There weren't those programs really. It was harder to get loans and harder to get help. So I feel like, at least there are those mechanisms out there for help, and social media is a big factor to be able to have that free advertising, and leveraging that right now is, I think, key for businesses. We had Facebook kind of, and tried to use that as we could, but yeah, my heart just, it hurts so much for all of the small business owners right now. And I really hope the community can come together and support local as much as possible, even if it's getting takeout or buying gift certificates, or just, sharing on social media, amplifying. Everybody needs to amplify right now. And for a lot of things. But it's, now's the time that the community can really come together and support each other. And I know it's so difficult, and I'm so sorry for the businesses.
Yeah, it's been a rough 2 months here, and we are finally starting to come back. Do you have any advice for the businesses as they're coming back?
Just try to stay hopeful. I know that it's hard, but keep focused on the passion of why you started it in the first place. You really have to remind yourself about that to keep yourself lifted up. When things were bad at Bohemia, my friend told me to stop going in the back door and walk in the front so I could see what other people were seeing. And I think, little shifts like that can help you keep going. Just be as cautious as you can with your spending. I feel like everything does work out on the other side. And it's traumatic if you do need to make a decision to close, but other doors open and other opportunities open. And there is a chance for you to be grateful for that experience, and it will lead you to other things. I mean, just the mere fact that people open businesses is such a courageous step, and such a risky proposition. And I just think to be as cautious as you can, to ask for as much help as you need from your community, and just keep your story straight.
Wow. The last 2 months have been heavy, but we're going to go a little heavier. And we're going to jump in because I feel like we have a platform to speak about what's going on in the world. So, as we still kind of face COVID and we're kind of coming out of it, we're jumping into the injustice of America and African American people being killed. We are a nonprofit that stands for inclusion, and we're not against racism. So we kind of want to open up the conversation. First, how are you doing and how are you coping? And then how can we as a community take a stand and stand up for Black people in America and Black people in Tucson?
So I'm breathing a lot. Wine is helping on occasion. And I'm just really trying to stay centered. And it's hard because it's such an emotional and heavy time, like you said. COVID started pulling back the veil of disparity in this country. And there's a lot of it. And it gave people time to pause and start to realize what was actually going on, because this isn't anything new. This has been happening for hundreds of years, and it needs to stop. There's absolutely no reason for it. It serves no purpose. And I think it's a powerful time of shift in this country, in the world. It is time for people to stop turning their eyes away. It's time to start educating yourself. If you don't think it's a problem, then please email me or find me on Facebook, and I will happily give you resources that will help you see that racism is real, it's unnecessary, it comes from baseless fear and learned behavior and generations of ignorance. And the time to change it is now. It's not comfortable. It's going to be hard. It's going to take a lot of work. But there are ways that we can shift it. And the world is, these demonstrations and protests are showing that people want this change. Mm-hmm. And across the world, people want this change. Other countries are protesting what is happening in America. Mm-hmm. And that solidarity will make the change easier. It will keep us stronger. but we have to do the work, and white people really have to do the work, because it shouldn't be put on the backs of people that are already oppressed and living in fear. Every life deserves to be safe and have opportunity and education and joy. And people living in a country with so much abundance and having to worry about walking down the street serves no one. So,
well, when I moved to Tucson and found out it was 2.5% Black people, I was like, wow, where are they at first? But secondly, people are so nice here and so inviting, and they have such a kind heart. And I just want to know, what can they do here in our small town, because we have to affect this first before we can go out and change the world. What can they do to amplify their voices during this time and all the time?
so I think following people on social media, following people of color on social media, is a really good start to see issues that you didn't really know were happening. And you can share those to your networks. Once you start educating yourself, you can start educating your family and your friends and your networks. So sharing the experiences of people, even though they're hard experiences and sad experiences and devastating experiences, sharing those to pull back that veil a little more, I think, is really important. And then just watch some documentaries. I mean, I would start with 13th by Ava DuVernay on Netflix. And that will make you want to fight for prison reform, for policy change. It will make you want to show up and vote. I think that is extremely important. And everybody get your mail-in ballots and go buy some stamps and support the post office, because we need to be able to vote big in November, and COVID has that possibility to make it harder. And not just voting, but holding your officials accountable. You know, I feel like Obama got elected and we all kind of fell asleep at the wheel, because so much grace and power and eloquence and change happened through him. But I personally feel like I stopped paying attention. Part of that was, stressors from the financial downturn, but part of it was just like, he got us, we're good. And then he lost his Congress because people didn't show up to vote for the midterms. So I think using your tools on the political realm, keeping your senators and congress people safe, voting in local elections as well. You need that local, that conscious local government on the state and local level. You need to vote for the right judges. I mean, it's a lot of work to do the research, but there are people like me who will nerd out on ballots and read things. So look up your friends that you can ask. I mean, people ask me during elections, like, who should I vote for? I'm like, well, this is my thoughts. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, but here are my opinions. So there are people out there. You don't have to do all the work, but you need to work with the people who are doing the work.
Well, guys, we're going to open it up for questions, but I do have one more question for you. The best way to take a stand as a business owner, I've seen over the weekend so many people just go dark and quiet. And I think now's the time for us not to go dark and quiet. So how, as a business owner, I think the question is normally, how do I not mess up my brand? And I think this is not a brand thing. It's something we have to speak out as people, because we are people running a business, but how can they speak out through their business?
I think more than ever, it's okay to make social and political statements through your business because you have the privilege of having that platform to do so. There used to be the old adage of don't talk about politics or religion in your business. And it's exactly that. It's old and it's done. Churches are dipping into politics, so we get to talk about it now as businesses. There's that risk of losing customers for sure, but there's so many more customers you can gain too. And I would rather take the money from somebody who wants a better world than take the money of somebody who doesn't want change. And I think that it's okay. It is, you have to give yourself permission to use all the platforms that you have, because if change doesn't happen, collapse might, and there's not going to be anybody that you're going to be able to sell your things to. If you can uplift your community.
Oh no, you froze.
Then no.
Okay. You have
this internet.
So I need that back. Whatever you were going to say, I need it back.
Where did I freeze?
Uplifting your community.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you uplift your community and everybody can have a piece of that pie, then everybody's going to spend that pie too. And so I think, there's definitely pros and cons about using that platform, but if not now, then when? Mm-hmm. And I think just it can enhance your brand, but it doesn't have to mar it either. And there's ways that you can do it. And if you don't know how to, then start watching other businesses that are, and that are making that statements and that are making those statements, because there's no guidebook here. And I think it's part of the learning curve. You really have to work hard to find your voice and find those inspirations with, again, people that are doing the work. Don't ask them, just pay attention to them. Watch what they're doing, be inspired. And I think that, everybody can find a way to speak their truths during this time.
Perfect. That was very eloquently said.
Thank you.
I love that you're sharing your heart, and it means so much for me to have you here today. I want to open the floor up for questions, guys. So if you have any questions, drop them in the box. Sophia is joining us. Sophia, you have any questions?
Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your perspective. And it's not just empty words, but this is something that you've been tackling injustice in your various roles by, being human and being a wonderful human. I did want to kind of circle back to something that I think is so powerful for entrepreneurs and small businesses to hear right now is your experience back in 2008 and this feeling of, I don't want to ask for help. Startup Tucson is a nonprofit who is offering that support to entrepreneurs and small businesses. So maybe could you share some reflections on yes, why not? Did you ask for help, and maybe some encouragement of what asking for help looks like?
So I think I was just nervous to, have bad PR. And I wanted that illusion of things going well. And I'm not sure, looking back, I'm not sure why. Certainly people close to the shop knew that things weren't great. But I just wanted to have that calm for people that were shopping. So it didn't feel like it, I didn't want to push people into buying things. I didn't want them to feel pressure to support. And so I don't feel like I asked for help. I certainly, I had my crew that was holding me up, and I did what I could, I think, financially, but stress is a monster, and it keeps you from seeing solutions because they seem exhausting at the time, because there's a lot of shift and work that needs to happen to try to fix things. So I feel like now there's more community resources, more business resources. So, which is wonderful that has happened in Tucson. I commend Startup Tucson. You've had to pivot so much in recent years, and it really is a testament to Tucson, to have that community support and that ingenuity. And lady power. Tell you what. So I just sharing your story with people that can help, finding mentors, just really reaching out to those with experience is key. And again, leveraging that social media. You've got free advertising all day long, and it takes a lot of work to do it, but there are people out there that can help. So
thanks. And then
but asking for help is hard.
Yes, yeah. And then we have a question from Jacqueline Volpe. I hope I pronounced your last name right. What approaches would you recommend to a small business that recently relied on open markets and vending events that aren't happening anymore? As a new company, still branding, how can we reach these customers without local events?
That is a very tough situation. I think pushing an online presence more than ever is key. It was so sad to see the Made in Tucson market not happen. I know that missing the street fair was really rough for the Avenue. There isn't, I don't think there's a good solid answer at this point. I think just keep doing the best that you can online. Using that time that you would be at events to work on more solid social media campaigns and email campaigns. I think email is still important because social media gets so bogged down with events and algorithms. And if you can have a direct line to your customer, and keep in touch. Like, I love getting the emails from Feast right now because Doug is just so honest and open about what is going on. And like Renee's Organic Oven, like those kind of businesses, they're being very, very transparent. And I think that having that transparency and emotion is very important right now because people will respond well to it. I think we need that connection. And so really, really just working online and trying to, I think more platforms, depending on how long these kind of limitations from COVID happen, I feel like more platforms will pop up for online selling. People are at home, they're going to shop from their computers, when they can shop. And so that's building that up. I know PopCycle has been working hard on getting all of their inventory online. It's a big pivot, but it's important.
Looking to see if we have any more questions. We've gone over so much.
And you'll have to go back and see all the love of the people who you've made an impression on.
Well, great comments.
Our community is so special, and so resilient. And I just know, we can make this. We can make this work. Tucson, we're rough. That desert makes you rough.
That's
And
right.
it,
Resilient and squirrely.
yeah, right. And I really encourage people, if they want to reach out to me, to find me on Facebook, Instagram. Whatever. You can share my email if you want. It's thunderboss40@gmail.com. Just, know that there are people that you can turn to and talk to, and I'm happy to help with any advice that I can. I'm just really holding everybody super, super close right now. And I know that we can work together to get through all of this and really make some positive change on the other side.
Well, with that, I think we're going to wrap it up because we've gone way over, but it was every minute of it.
Thank you. I'm so, so grateful to be here. Thank you so much.
We appreciate you for being here. Sophia, do you have anything at the end of this? Are we good to go?
Well, we have labs next Monday, so if you're ready to go, we're here for you.
Startup Bites on Friday at noon. Guys, we're going to continue this conversation. It's not going anywhere. So if you have questions or you just want to reach out, drop us an email or comment on this Facebook because it's going to be here forever. And just be kind this week. Be kind. Let people know you care. A smile doesn't take you anything. And lift up other voices. So with that, we'll see you Friday for Startup Bites, Monday for Startup Labs, and next Wednesday for Startup Coffee. Bye, guys.
Bye.